Chapter 1. The Transaction. The rain hammered against the grimy windows of the diner like bullets, each drop a reminder that there was no escape from this moment. I sat in the cracked vinyl booth, my hands trembling around a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, watching the door and praying he wouldn't show up. But prayers were for people who still believed in miracles, and I'd stopped believing in those the day my father gambled away everything we owned, including me. The odd bell above the door chimed, and my heart dropped into my stomach. A man stepped inside, shaking rain from his dark coat, his eyes scanning the nearly empty diner with predatory precision. He was nothing like I'd expected. The sparse details my father had given me painted a picture of some sleazy businessman looking to buy himself a pretty young wife. Instead, the man who approached my table moved with the fluid grace of someone who could kill without breaking a sweat. He was tall, easily 6'4", with broad shoulders that filled out his expensive black coat. His hair was dark as midnight, swept back from a face that belonged on ancient coins, all sharp angles and aristocratic lines. But it was his eyes that made my breath catch. They were the color of winter storms, pale gray-blue and utterly merciless. "Sarah Blackwood," he said, and my name on his lips sounded like a death sentence. His voice was deep, cultured, with just a hint of an accent I couldn't place. "I'm Kieran Cross." I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. This man, this beautiful, terrifying stranger, owned me now. The legal documents were already signed, the money already transferred to pay off my father's debts to some very dangerous people. He slid into the booth across from me without invitation, his movements deliberate and controlled. Up close, I could see the faint scars along his knuckles, the way his eyes seemed to catch and hold the diner's fluorescent light like an animal's. "You're not what I expected," I managed to whisper, proud that my voice didn't shake. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his features. "Neither are you." I'd dressed carefully for this meeting, or execution, as I'd been thinking of it. My best jeans, a simple blue sweater that brought out my eyes, my mother's silver locket at my throat. I'd wanted to look presentable, but not eager. Now, under his intense scrutiny, I felt like prey being evaluated by a predator. "The arrangement is simple," he continued, pulling out an envelope from inside his coat. "You'll come with me tonight. Your father's debts are cleared, and you'll be provided for. In return, you'll fulfill certain obligations." My stomach lurched. What kind of obligations? For a moment, something almost human crossed his face. "Not what you're thinking. You have my word on that." The word of a man who buys women? The defiance slipped out before I could stop it, years of anger and helplessness bubbling to the surface. Instead of anger, he looked almost impressed. The word of a man who saves them. Before I could ask what he meant, the diner door burst, open again. 3 men in cheap suits stumbled in, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I recognized them immediately. Vincent Marchetti's enforcers, the men my father owed money to. The men who'd made it very clear what would happen to me if the debt wasn't paid. Well, the tallest one sneered, water dripping from his thinning hair. "If it isn't our little collateral." I shrank back against the booth, but Kieran didn't even turn around. He simply reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. His skin was burning hot, almost fever warm, and I felt an electric shock run up my arm at the contact. "Gentlemen," Kieran said without turning around, his voice carrying a note of bored authority. "I believe you'll find the lady's debts have been settled." The enforcer laughed, but there was a nervous edge to it. "Says who? We ain't heard nothing about." Kieran finally turned, and the man's words died in his throat. The temperature in the diner seemed to plummet even further, and for just a moment, I could have sworn I saw something inhuman flicker in Kieran's pale eyes. "Says me." The words were barely above a whisper, but they carried the weight of absolute authority. Vincent received his payment an hour ago, with interest. The three men exchanged uncertain glances. The leader tried to bluster, but something about Kieran's stillness, his complete lack of fear, made the words stick in his throat. "This ain't over," he finally managed. "It is." Kieran's voice carried a finality that brooked no argument. "And if I see any of you near her again, we'll have a very different conversation." They left without another word, practically tripping over themselves in their haste to get away. I stared after them in shock, then turned back to Kieran, who was calmly straightening his coat. "How did you—" I started. "Your father's debts were to more than just Vincent Marchetti," he said, as if that explained everything. "I've settled all of them. You're free of that particular burden. But not free of you." Something dark and complex moved across his features. "No, not free of me." Thunder crashed overhead so loud it shook the windows. The storm was getting worse, and suddenly the warm diner felt like the last safe place on earth. "I need to know," I said, my voice barely audible over the rain. "What exactly did my father sell me into?" Kieran was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his words sent chills down my spine. "Marriage. Binding, legal, and permanent." He paused, those storm-gray eyes holding mine. "The ceremony is tomorrow night." My world tilted sideways. "Tomorrow? But I don't even know you. This isn't about love, Sarah." My name again, spoken like a prayer and a curse. "This is about survival. Yours and mine." Before I could ask what he meant, he stood, tossing money on the table for my untouched coffee. "We need to leave. Now. I can't just— My things, my apartment. Already handled. Everything you'll need is waiting." The casual efficiency with which he'd dismantled my entire life should have terrified me. Instead, I found myself standing, following him toward the door like I was caught in some kind of spell. "Why me?" I asked as he held the door open. "Out of all the women in the world, why did you choose to buy me?" He paused in the doorway, rain beginning to soak through his coat. When he looked at me, there was something almost vulnerable in his expression. "I didn't choose you, Sarah." His voice was so quiet I almost couldn't hear it over the storm. "You were chosen for me." And with those cryptic words, he led me out into the tempest, toward a future I couldn't even begin to imagine. The sleek black SUV waiting at the curb looked like something from a movie. All tinted windows and predatory lines. As Kieran opened the passenger door for me, I caught a glimpse of the driver. Another large man with the same dangerous stillness, the same unnaturally sharp awareness of his surroundings. "Last chance," Kieran said as I hesitated on the threshold. "Get in that car, and there's no going back. Your old life ends tonight." I looked back at the diner, at the rain-soaked street, at the wreckage of everything I'd ever known. Then I looked at him, this beautiful, mysterious stranger who'd somehow become my salvation and my captor in the same breath. Was there ever really a choice? I asked. Something that might have been respect flickered in his eyes. "No," he said simply. "There wasn't." I got in the car. As we pulled away from the curb, I pressed my face to the window and watched my old life disappear into the storm. Whatever was waiting for me in the darkness ahead, there was no turning back now. The man beside me remained silent as we drove through the night, but I could feel his presence like electricity in the air. Every instinct I had was screaming that Kieran Cross was dangerous, more dangerous than I could possibly understand. What I didn't know yet was that danger was exactly what I needed, and that tomorrow night, when I became his wife, I would discover that some hungers were worth the risk of being devoured. Chapter 2. Into the wolf's den. The drive through the mountains seemed endless. Rain lashed against the SUV's windows as we climbed higher into the wilderness, leaving civilization further behind with each passing mile. I'd lost track of time somewhere, around the third hour, when the last gas station had disappeared in our rearview mirror, and nothing remained but towering pines and darkness. Kieran hadn't spoken since we'd left the diner. He sat beside me, like a statue carved from shadow and starlight, his profile illuminated intermittently by the dashboard lights. Even in silence, his presence filled the space between us with an electric tension that made my skin prickle. "Where are we going?" I finally asked, my voice hoarse from disuse. "Home," he replied without looking at me. "Your home, not mine." Now he did turn, those storm-gray eyes finding mine in the darkness. "It will be." The finality in his voice sent a shiver down my spine. I turned back to the window, watching the forest blur past. Every mile took me further from everything I'd ever known, deeper into a world that felt increasingly unreal. "Tell me about yourself," I said, desperate to break the suffocating silence. "I mean, I'm going to marry you tomorrow. Shouldn't I know something about my future husband?" A muscle ticked in his jaw. "What would you like to know?" "Everything. Anything. What do you do for a living? Do you have family? How old are you?" I was babbling now, but I couldn't stop. "Do you always buy women to marry them? Or am I special?" The driver, Marcus, Kieran had called him, made a sound that might have been a snort of amusement. Kieran shot him a look that could have frozen fire. "I don't buy women," Kieran said finally. "I save them." "From what?" "From men like your father." The casual cruelty of the statement hit me like a physical blow. He wasn't wrong. My father had sold me to pay his gambling debts, but hearing it stated so bluntly made the reality of my situation crash over me again. "He wasn't always like that," I whispered, though I wasn't sure why I was defending him. "After my mother died, he just lost himself." Kieran's expression softened slightly. "How long ago?" 3 years. Cancer. The word still tasted like poison in my mouth. She fought for 2 years, but in the end, I'm sorry. The sincerity in his voice surprised me. For a moment, the dangerous stranger beside me looked almost human. "What about your family?" I asked. His jaw tightened again. "Dead." "I'm sorry too." We fell back into silence, but it felt different now. Less hostile. More aware. Like we were two wounded animals circling each other, trying to decide if the other was predator or prey. The SUV began to slow, and I looked out to see massive iron gates looming out of the darkness. Marcus spoke into some kind of intercom, and the gates swung open with mechanical precision. We drove up a winding road lined with towering pines, their branches creating a canopy so thick that even the storm seemed muted. Then the house came into view, and my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a house. It was a fortress. The structure rose from the mountainside like something out of a Gothic novel, all stone and timber and soaring lines. Warm light glowed from dozens of windows, and I could see smoke rising from several chimneys. It should have looked welcoming. Instead, it looked like the kind of place where fairy tale princesses went to be locked in towers. "This is where you live?" I breathed. "This is where we live," Kieran corrected, and the possessive note in his voice made my stomach flutter with something that wasn't entirely fear. Marcus pulled up to the front entrance, where a small army of people waited despite the late hour and driving rain. As Kieran helped me from the SUV, I caught glimpses of faces in the warm light spilling from the doorway. Men and women of various ages, all watching me with the same intense curiosity. "The staff?" I asked. "Family," Kieran replied, which only confused me more. A woman stepped forward from the group, older, with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes. But there was something about the way she moved that reminded me of Kieran. That same predatory grace, that same unnatural stillness. "So this is her," the woman said, and her voice carried the same trace of accent as Kieran's. Her eyes swept over me, not unkindly, but with the thoroughness of someone taking inventory. "She's stronger than I expected." "Sarah," Kieran said, his hand settling on the small of my back with proprietary ease. "This is Elena Cross, my aunt." The pause before aunt was significant, though I couldn't understand why. Elena stepped closer, and I caught a scent that was both familiar and strange. Something wild and woodsy, like pine and rain and something else I couldn't identify. "Welcome to the family, child," Elena said, taking my hands in hers. Her skin was fever-warm, just like Kieran's, and her grip was stronger than any woman her age should possess. "We've been waiting for you for a very long time." Waiting for me? Elena and Kieran exchanged a look loaded with meaning I couldn't decipher. "Come," Kieran said, guiding me toward the entrance. "You must be exhausted." The interior of the house was as impressive as the exterior. Soaring ceilings, massive stone fireplaces, and furniture that looked like it had been crafted by master artisans. But it was the people that captured my attention. They lined the hallways and filled the rooms, all of them watching me with that same intense interest. There had to be at least 30 of them, and they all shared certain characteristics. They were all beautiful, for one thing, with the kind of effortless physical perfection that belonged in magazines. They all moved with that same predatory grace I'd noticed in Kieran and Elena, and they all had eyes that seemed to glow slightly in the firelight. "So many people," I murmured. "The Crosspack family is large," Kieran said, and again there was that significant pause. "But you'll have time to meet everyone properly later. Tonight you need rest." He led me up a sweeping staircase, past more curious faces, and whispered conversations in languages I didn't recognize. Finally, we stopped before a heavy wooden door. "Your room," Kieran said, pushing it open. The bedroom beyond was stunning, all rich fabrics and warm wood, with a fireplace crackling merrily in one corner and French doors that probably led to a balcony. It was also clearly designed for a woman, with delicate touches that spoke of careful preparation. "You knew I was coming," I realized. "Yes." "For how long?" Another of those loaded pauses. "Longer than you might think." I stepped into the room, running my fingers over the silk bedspread. Everything was perfect, luxurious, and utterly foreign. "The bathroom?" He gestured to another door. "You'll find everything you need. Clothes, toiletries, whatever Elena thought you might want." I turned to face him. This mysterious man who'd bought me from my father and brought me to his mountain fortress. "And where will you sleep?" Something dark and hungry flashed in his eyes. "Not here. Not tonight. But tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll be married. Tomorrow night." He trailed off, his gaze dropping to my mouth before snapping back to my eyes. "Tomorrow night will be different." Heat flooded my cheeks. Despite everything, the circumstances, the strangeness, the fear, there was something about Kieran Cross that called to something deep inside me. Something that made my heart race and my skin tingle with awareness. "I should let you rest," he said, but he didn't move toward the door. "Kieran," I said, his name feeling strange on my tongue. "What aren't you telling me?" For a moment, I thought, he might actually answer. His eyes searched my face as if he was looking for something, some sign or signal I didn't understand. "Everything," he said finally. "I'm not telling you everything." "Will you? Eventually?" "Yes." His voice was rough with some emotion I couldn't name. "But not tonight. Tonight, you're still human enough to run. The words sent ice through my veins. Human enough? What does that mean? But he was already backing toward the door, putting distance between us like I was something dangerous. Sleep well, Sarah, he said. Tomorrow changes everything. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and I heard the unmistakable sound of a lock turning. I was alone in my beautiful prison, with more questions than answers and a wedding waiting for me in less than 24 hours. I walked to the French doors and looked out at the storm-lashed forest, feeling like I was standing on the edge of an abyss. Whatever secrets Kieran and his family were hiding, I was about to become part of them whether I wanted to or not. The only question was whether I would survive long enough to regret it. Outside, something howled in the distance, long and mournful, and utterly wild. The sound raised every hair on my body and sent primitive shivers down my spine. I told myself it was just the wind. But deep down, I knew better. Chapter 3. The Wedding That Wasn't. I woke to the sound of someone moving around my room. Panic shot through me as I bolted upright, clutching the silk sheets to my chest. A woman I didn't recognize stood at the foot of my bed, laying out what looked like a wedding dress across the chair. She was young, maybe my age, with auburn hair and those same unnaturally bright eyes I'd noticed in everyone here. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice hoarse with sleep. She smiled, and I caught a glimpse of teeth that seemed slightly too sharp. "I'm Lydia. Elena sent me to help you get ready." "Ready for what?" "Your wedding, of course." She said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. "The ceremony is at sunset." I looked toward the French doors, where pale morning light filtered through the curtains. The storm had passed, leaving the world outside crystalline and fresh. But despite the beautiful day, dread settled in my stomach like a stone. "I can't," I whispered. Lydia tilted her head, studying me with those two bright eyes. "Can't what?" "I can't marry him. I don't know him. I don't know any of you." I was babbling again, but I couldn't stop. "This is insane. People don't just buy wives anymore. This isn't the Middle Ages, isn't it?" Lydia asked, and something in her tone made me look at her more carefully. "You'd be surprised how old some of our traditions are." Before I could ask what she meant, the door opened and Elena entered, carrying a breakfast tray. She moved with that same predatory grace, but her expression was kind. "Good morning, dear," she said, setting the tray on the bedside table. "I thought you might be hungry." The smell of the food made my stomach growl, but I was too agitated to eat. "Elena, please. I need to talk to Kieran. I need to understand what's happening here." Elena sat on the edge of the bed, her fever-warm hand covering mine. "What's happening is that you're fulfilling your destiny." "My destiny?" I laughed, but it came out harsh and broken. "My destiny is to be sold to a stranger and married off like some kind of medieval bride prize?" "Your destiny," Elena said softly, "is to save us all." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" But Elena was already standing, smoothing down her skirt. "Eat your breakfast, child. You'll need your strength for what's coming." "What's coming? What are you talking about?" Neither woman answered. They moved around the room with efficient purpose, laying out undergarments and shoes, preparing a bath in the enormous bathroom I'd been too exhausted to explore the night before. "I want to see Kieran," I said as Lydia began running water in the clawfoot tub. "I want to see him now." "He's hunting," Lydia said without looking up. "Hunting what?" The look she gave me was almost pitying. "You really don't know, do you?" "Know what?" But she just shook her head and added something to the bathwater that made it smell like pine and rain, and something wild I couldn't identify. The morning passed in a blur of preparations I felt powerless to stop. The dress was beautiful, ivory, silk that flowed like water, with intricate beadwork that caught the light. It fit perfectly, which should have been impossible since no one had measured me. The shoes were perfect too, as were the delicate undergarments that felt like they'd been made specifically for my body. "How?" I asked, as Lydia fastened a necklace around my throat. A beautiful silver pendant in the shape of a crescent moon. "Kieran has good eyes," was all she said. As the day wore on, more women came and went. They did my hair, my makeup, my nails. They spoke in hushed tones in that strange language I'd heard the night before, occasionally shooting me glances that ranged from curious to sympathetic to something that might have been afraid. "What language is that?" I asked during a lull in the activity. "Old tongue," said one of the women. Mira, I thought her name was. "The language of our people." "Your people?" She exchanged a look with Lydia. "Kieran will explain everything after the ceremony." "Why not before?" "Because," said a new voice from the doorway, "some truths are easier to accept when you're already bound." I turned to see a man standing in the entrance, tall and dark-haired like Kieran, but older, with silver threading through the black. His eyes were the same pale gray, and when he smiled, I saw those same two sharp teeth. "Uncle Darius," Lydia said, and there was warning in her tone. "Don't worry, little wolf," he said, his gaze never leaving mine. "I'm not here to spoil anyone's secrets." Little wolf. The endearment sent chills down my spine. "I'm here," Darius continued, stepping into the room, "to escort the bride to her groom." "It's time?" Elena asked, appearing at his shoulder. He nodded. "The sun is setting. Everyone's gathered." My heart began to race. "Wait, I need a moment. I need to think." "Thinking is overrated," Darius said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Sometimes you just have to trust fate." They surrounded me then, a gentle but implacable force guiding me from the room and down the hallway. The house was full of people, more than I'd seen the night before. They lined the stairs, filled the hallways, all of them dressed in their finest clothes, all of them watching me with that same intense interest. We moved through the house and out onto a terrace I hadn't known existed. The sun was indeed setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The terrace overlooked a garden where torches had been lit, creating pools of dancing light in the gathering dusk. And there, waiting at the end of an aisle lined with white roses, was Kieran. He was dressed in a black suit that looked like it, had been tailored by angels, his dark hair combed back from his face. But it was his eyes that captured me, those storm-gray eyes that seemed to glow in the torchlight as they found mine across the distance. The crowd fell silent as Darius offered me his arm. "Ready?" "No," I whispered. He smiled, and this time, it was almost gentle. None of us ever are. The walk down the aisle felt like a dream, or a nightmare. Everyone was watching, and I could feel the weight of their attention like a physical thing. But it was Kieran who held my focus. As I drew closer, I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands were clenched at his sides. He looked like a man going to his execution. When I reached him, Darius placed my hand in Kieran's. The moment our skin touched, that familiar, electric shock ran up my arm, but this time it was stronger, more intense. Kieran's pupils dilated, and for just a moment, I could have sworn they flickered gold. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice rough. "You look terrified," I replied, something that might have been a smile tugged at his lips. "I am." "Of marrying me? Of what comes after?" Before I could ask what he meant, an elderly man stepped forward. He was tall and imposing, with white hair and eyes like winter ice. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "We gather tonight to witness the binding of two souls," he began, and his words seemed to echo strangely in the still air. "Kieran Cross, Alpha of the Northern Pack, and Sarah Blackwood, the one who was promised. Alpha, Northern Pack, The one who was promised. The words hit me like hammer blows, but before I could process them fully, something else happened. A howl rose from the forest, long and mournful and utterly wild. It was answered by another, then another, until the air was filled with an otherworldly chorus. The crowd stirred restlessly, but no one looked surprised. No one looked afraid. Except me. "What's happening?" I whispered. Kieran's grip on my hand tightened. "Sarah, I need you to listen to me very carefully." "The Blackwood line returns to us," the elderly man continued, his voice rising over the howling. "The debt of blood is paid. The prophecy begins to unfold." "Kieran, what is he talking about?" But Kieran wasn't looking at me anymore. His head was tilted, listening to something I couldn't hear. Around us, the crowd was growing agitated, their whispered conversations becoming urgent. "Something's wrong," Elena said, appearing at Kieran's side. "They're too close." "Who's too close?" I demanded. That's when I saw them. Shapes moving at the edge of the forest. At first I thought they were dogs, but as they stepped into the torchlight, I realized they were far too large, too wild, too focused. Wolves, dozens of them, surrounding the garden, their eyes glowing like amber jewels in the darkness. The crowd erupted into chaos. People were shouting, some in English, some in that strange old tongue. But through it all, the wolves remained perfectly still, watching, waiting. "The Blackwood bloodline," the elderly man said, his voice somehow carrying over the pandemonium. "They've come for the Blackwood bloodline." "Kieran," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "What does that mean?" When he turned to me, his eyes were no longer gray. They were gold. Bright, inhuman gold. "It means," he said, his voice changing, becoming deeper, more resonant, "that you're not entirely human, Sarah, and neither am I." The world tilted sideways. The howling grew louder. And somewhere in the chaos, I heard Elena's voice, sharp with command. "Take her inside. Now, before they catch her scent." But it was too late. The largest wolf stepped forward, and when it opened, its mouth, it spoke with a voice like grinding stone. "Return what was stolen from us, Cross. Return the Blackwood heir, or face the consequences." My knees gave out. The last thing I saw before darkness claimed me was Kieran's face, transformed by the golden glow in his eyes, looking down at me with an expression that was equal parts love and despair. I was not entirely human, and tomorrow, if I survived the night, I would find out exactly what that meant. Chapter 4. Blood Memory. I came back to consciousness slowly, like surfacing from deep, dark water. My head felt like it had been split with an axe, and every sound seemed magnified. The crackle of fire, the whisper of fabric, the soft murmur of voices speaking in that old tongue. "She's waking up," someone said. Elena's voice, tight with worry. I opened my eyes to find myself back in my room, still wearing the wedding dress, but now lying on top of the covers. Kieran sat in the chair beside the bed, his elbows on his knees, his head in his hands. He'd changed out of his suit into dark jeans and a black sweater, but I could still see the tension coiled in every line of his body. "The wolves," I whispered, and he looked up sharply. His eyes were gray again, but I could see flecks of gold swimming in their depths like trapped sunlight. "You remember," I remember a wolf talking to me. I struggled to sit up, my head spinning. "I remember you, your eyes." "Changed." He finished the sentence for me, his voice flat. "Yes." Elena appeared with a glass of water, helping me drink while Kieran watched with an intensity that made my skin prickle. I could feel something different about myself, like I was suddenly aware of senses I'd never known I possessed. I could smell the pine from the forest, hear conversations happening floors below us. feel the pulse of life from every person in the house. "What's happening to me?" I asked. "Your heritage is awakening," Elena said softly. "Being here, being around us. It's calling to the part of you that's been sleeping." "What part of me?" Kieran leaned forward, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. "Sarah, what do you know about your mother's family?" "Nothing." The answer came automatically. She never talked about them. Said they died when she was young. "They didn't die," Kieran said quietly. "They were murdered." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" 30 years ago, there was a war between the packs, Elena explained, settling into another chair. The Blackwood Pack was one of the most powerful in North America. They controlled territory from here to the Canadian border, and they were known for their unique gifts. Gifts. The ability to communicate with all shifters, not just their own kind, Kieran said. They were mediators, peacekeepers, natural diplomats who could prevent wars before they started. I shook my head, trying to process what they were telling me. "You're saying my mother was some kind of werewolf diplomat?" "Your mother was the Blackwood Alpha's daughter," Elena said gently. "She was meant to be the next leader of their pack. But she chose love instead," Kieran continued. "She fell in love with a human, your father. And when her pack forbade, the Union, she ran." My hands began to shake. "That's impossible. My mother was human. She was a nurse. She worked in a hospital." "She was all of those things," Elena agreed. "But she was also something more. The rival pack, the Shadowclaw, saw her defection as weakness." Kieran's voice was getting rougher, more strained. "They used it as an excuse to attack. They slaughtered nearly the entire Blackwood Pack, claiming their territory." "Nearly? Your mother escaped because she was already living among humans. A few others survived by going into hiding." Elena's eyes were sad. "But the Blackwood line was thought to be extinct." "Until you," Kieran said. And the way he looked at me made my heart race for reasons I didn't want to examine. "Until my packs, scouts found traces of Blackwood scent in that diner." I stood up too quickly, the room spinning around me. "This is insane. You're telling me fairy tales." "Am I?" Kieran rose too, moving with that predatory grace. "Then explain what you're feeling right now. The heightened senses. The way you can smell the forest from here, hear conversations 3 floors down." I wanted to deny it, but I couldn't. Because he was right. I could hear Lydia talking to someone in the kitchen about food supplies. I could smell rain on the wind, though the sky had been clear. I could sense the presence of every person in the house, like points of warmth in my consciousness. "The Shadowclaw Pack has been hunting for any surviving Blackwoods for 3 decades, Elena said. "That's who came tonight. They want to finish what they started." "Why?" My voice cracked. "What did we ever do to them?" "You existed," Kieran said simply. "Blackwood blood carries power they want for themselves. If they can capture you, force you to mate with one of their pack, they'd have access to Blackwood gifts through your children," Elena finished. "They could become the mediator pack, the peacekeepers. It would give them political power over every shifter territory in North America." I sank back onto the bed, overwhelmed. "And you? What do you want from me?" Kieran's jaw tightened. "Protection. For both of us." "I don't understand." He began to pace, running his hands through his dark hair. "My pack has enemies too. Rivals who want our territory, our resources. But if I have a Blackwood mate, you'd have political immunity," I realized. "Other packs couldn't attack you without violating the old treaties." "Yes." The clinical way he said it felt like a knife to my chest. "So this marriage, this whole thing, it's just politics." "It started that way," he admitted, and his honesty hurt worse than any lie could have. When we learned there was a surviving Blackwood, the pack elders decided we needed to find you first, offer you protection in exchange for a political alliance. By buying me from my father. By saving you from men who would have used you worse than we ever could. I laughed, but it came out broken and bitter. How noble of you. Sarah, don't. I held up a hand to stop him. Just don't. I need to think. But thinking was impossible with all these new sensations overwhelming me. I could hear heartbeats. Now, Kieran's racing, Elena's steady and strong. I could smell emotions. Kieran's guilt and something darker, more complex. Elena's maternal concern. And from the floors below, the anxiety of an entire pack waiting to see what would happen to their future. There's more, Elena said gently. More. I laughed again, and this time it sounded dangerously close to hysteria. What more could there possibly be? The reason the Shadowclaw pack is so desperate to find you now, Kieran said. The reason they risked everything to come here tonight. He moved to the window, staring out at the dark forest. There's a prophecy, an old one, from before the wars. It speaks of a Blackwood heir who will either unite all the packs under one rule or destroy the shifter world entirely. And you think that's me? I think, he said, turning back to face me, that you're the most powerful being any of us has ever encountered, and you don't even know it yet. As if to prove his point, something stirred inside me, a warmth that started in my chest and spread outward like liquid fire. The sensation was both terrifying and exhilarating, like standing at the edge of a cliff and wanting to jump. What's happening? I gasped. Your wolf is waking up, Elena said, moving closer. Don't fight it, child. Let it come. I don't have a wolf. But even as I said it, I could feel something wild and fierce stirring in my bones. Kieran was beside me in an instant, his hands on my shoulders. Look at me, Sarah. Focus on my voice. I met his eyes, and the gold in them seemed to call to something deep inside me. The burning sensation intensified, and I could feel my canine teeth lengthening, my nails sharpening to claws. That's it, he murmured. Don't be afraid. I've got you. I can't. I don't know how. You don't have to know how. It's in your blood. Your mother's blood. His thumb stroked over my cheekbones, and I realized I was crying. Trust your instincts. The change came in a rush, not a full shift, but a partial one that left me gasping and shaking. When it was over, I could see better in the dim light, could hear Elena's whispered prayer in the old tongue, could smell Kieran's scent more clearly. He smelled like pine and rain, and something else. Something wild and masculine and utterly intoxicating. Beautiful, he whispered, and the wonder in his voice made my heart skip. What am I? I asked. You're exactly what you were always meant to be, Elena said. You're home, child. You're finally home. But even as she spoke, a howl rose from the forest, different from the ones before. This one was filled with rage and promise of violence. They're not giving up, Kieran said, his body tensing. They'll be back. What do we do? He looked at me then, and I saw something in his expression that took my breath away. It wasn't just duty or political necessity. It was something deeper, more primal. We finish what we started, he said. We complete the mating bond. Tonight. Kieran, Elena warned. It's the only way to protect her, he said, never taking his eyes off mine. Once she's truly mine, the Shadowclaw pack will have to go through me to get to her. And if I say no? His expression grew pained. Then I'll still protect you with my life. But the bond would make us both stronger. It would give you access to the full extent of your abilities. Another howl, closer this time. They were circling the house. How long do I have to decide? Until dawn, he said. After that, they'll attack whether we're bonded or not. I looked at this man, this Alpha, who'd bought me from my father and brought me into a world I never knew existed, who'd told me I was part of an ancient prophecy and that my mother's entire family had been murdered for their power, who was asking me to bind my soul to his to keep us both alive. If we do this, I said slowly, if we complete this bond, what does that mean? Really? It means you'll be able to shift fully. It means you'll have access to abilities you can't imagine. And it means... He paused, his Adam's apple bobbing. It means we'll be connected in ways that go beyond marriage, beyond human understanding. Forever? Forever. The howling was getting louder. Whatever was coming, it was coming fast. I thought about my mother, the woman who'd given up everything for love. I thought about my father, who'd sold me to pay his debts. I thought about the empty life I'd been living, the feeling that I was always waiting for something to begin. Maybe this was what I'd been waiting for. Okay, I whispered. Okay? Complete the bond. Make me yours. I met his eyes, saw the flare of gold in their depths. But know this, Kieran Cross. If you're lying to me, if this is just about politics or prophecies or power, I will find a way to make you regret it. He smiled then, the first real smile I'd seen from him. I wouldn't expect anything less from a Blackwood. Outside, the howling reached a crescendo, and I knew our time was up. Whatever came next, we would face it together, or we would die trying. Chapter 5. Blood and Fire. The ceremony Elena prepared was nothing like the interrupted wedding. Gone were the white roses and formal arrangements. Instead, she led us down to a circular chamber deep beneath the house, carved directly from the mountain stone. Ancient symbols covered the walls, glowing faintly in the light of dozens of candles. This is sacred ground, Elena explained as we descended the narrow stone steps. Every Cross Alpha for 300 years has completed their mating bond here. My bare feet were silent on the cold stone, the simple white dress Elena had given, me flowing around my ankles like water. Kieran walked beside me, similarly dressed in dark pants and a white shirt, his usual composure cracked around the edges. "Are you afraid?" I asked him. "Terrified," he admitted. "But not for the reasons you might think." "What do you mean?" He stopped walking, turning to face me in the flickering candlelight. "The mating bond isn't just ceremony, Sarah. It's magic. Old magic. Once it's complete, I'll be able to feel everything you feel. Your pain will be my pain. Your joy, my joy." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Your secrets will be my secrets." The implication hit me like a physical blow. You'll know if I'm lying about my feelings, and you'll know if I am. We stared at each other in the dancing shadows, the weight of that revelation settling between us. No pretense, no polite fiction. Whatever happened after tonight, we would know the truth of each other's hearts. That's what you're afraid of, I realized. Not the Shadow Claw Pack, not the prophecy. You're afraid of what I'll see when I look inside your soul. His jaw worked silently for a moment. Then, yes. Before I could respond, Elena called from below. "It's time." The circular chamber was breathtaking. The stone walls were covered in carvings that seemed to move in the candlelight. Wolves running, hunting, howling at carved moons. In the center of the room stood an altar made from a single piece of black granite, its surface worn smooth by centuries of use. The pack elders wanted to officiate, Elena said, setting down a silver bowl filled with what looked like blood. But under the circumstances, we do this alone, Kieran finished. No witnesses, no politics, just us. Elena nodded, understanding passing between them. I'll guard the stairs, but you don't have much time. They're already probing our outer defenses. As if to emphasize her point, a distant crash echoed through the stone walls. Glass breaking. Doors splintering. They're in the house, Kieran said grimly. Then we'd better hurry. Elena pressed a silver knife into my hands, the blade gleaming wickedly in the candlelight. The old ways require blood, child. Your blood, mixed with his, offered freely to seal the bond. My hands shook as I took the knife. What exactly happens during this ritual? You'll drink from each other, Elena explained quickly, already moving toward the stairs. The shared blood will trigger the final awakening of your wolf. But more than that, it will create a connection between your souls that death itself cannot break. Another crash, closer this time. Shouting voices, the sound of claws on stone. Elena, Kieran called after her. Be careful. She paused at the foot of the stairs, her expression fierce. Take care of our girl, nephew. She's precious. Cargo. And then she was gone, leaving us alone in the sacred chamber with nothing but candlelight and the weight of destiny. So, I said, trying to keep my voice light despite the terror clawing at my chest. How does this work exactly? Kieran moved to the altar, his movements sharp with tension. We each make a cut. Here. He pressed his thumb to his wrist, where the pulse beat strong and fast. We share the blood. And then we see if the bond takes. He looked up at me, gold already flickering in his gray eyes. Some matings don't work, if our souls aren't compatible. What happens? Nothing. The blood mingles, but the bond doesn't form. We'd be married in name only. And if it does work, the gold in his eyes flared brighter. Then we become something more than human, more than shifter. We become two halves of the same soul. A scream echoed from somewhere above us, followed by the sound of splintering wood. Whatever was happening, up there it was getting worse. Your pack, I said. Fear for people I barely knew surprising me with its intensity. We'll hold the line as long as they can. But I could see the worry in his expression, the way his body strained toward the sounds of battle. But we need to do this now, Sarah, before they break through. I nodded, moving to stand across from him at the altar. The silver knife felt cold and heavy in my hands, its blade reflecting the dancing flames. You first, he said softly. I pressed the knife to my wrist, surprised by how sharp it was. The cut was shallow but immediate, blood welling up in a thin line. The pain was nothing compared to the electric shock that ran through me the moment my blood touched the stone altar. Now you, I said, holding out the knife. Kieran took it from me, our fingers brushing. Even that simple contact sent fire racing through my veins. He made his own cut without hesitation, deeper than mine, and pressed his wrist to the stone beside. My blood. The moment our blood touched, the world exploded. Power rushed through me like a tidal wave, primal and overwhelming. I could feel Kieran's presence in my mind, his emotions crashing into mine. Fear, hope, desire, and something else. Something that took my breath away. Love. Not the desperate passion of movies or books, but something deeper. Something that felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. Sarah, he whispered, his voice rough with wonder. I looked up to find his eyes completely gold now, glowing in the candlelight. When I looked down at my hands, I could see the same golden light emanating from my skin. Is it working? I asked. Instead of answering, he reached across the altar and took my bleeding wrist in his hands. The touch sent shockwaves through both of us, and I gasped as I felt his emotions more clearly than my own. The love was there, yes, but so was guilt, shame, the bone-deep certainty that he didn't deserve happiness, that everything he touched was eventually destroyed. "Kieran," I breathed, understanding flooding through me. "What happened to you?" For a moment, I thought he might pull away. But the bond was already forming, already making it impossible for either of us to hide. "My last mate," he said, his voice barely audible. "She died because of me, because I couldn't protect her." The words hit me like physical blows, not because of their content, but because of the agony behind them. Through the growing connection, I could feel his pain as if it were my own. The crushing weight of guilt, the certainty that love meant loss, that caring for someone meant watching them die. "That's why you were afraid," I realized. Not of the bond itself, but of caring for someone again. He nodded, his thumb stroking over the cut on my wrist. "I can't lose another mate, Sarah. I won't survive it. Then don't lose me." The simplicity of the statement seemed to surprise him. "It's not that easy, isn't it?" I moved around the altar until I was standing directly in front of him. "I'm not her, Kieran. I'm not fragile. I'm not helpless. And I'm not going anywhere. You don't understand. I understand that you're scared. I understand that you've been hurt before. But I also understand that right now, in this moment, you care about me. Not because of politics or prophecies or pack alliances, but because of who I am." He stared at me for a long moment, emotions warring across his face. Then slowly, he lifted his own wrist to his mouth. "Together?" he asked. I nodded, bringing his bleeding wrist to my lips. "Together." We drank at the same time. The taste of his blood was copper and lightning, wild forests, and ancient power. But underneath it all was something uniquely him, something that sang to every cell in my body and whispered that this was right, this was meant to be. The bond snapped into place like a rubber band stretched to its breaking point. Suddenly I could feel everything, his heartbeat matching mine, his strength flowing into my body, his wolf recognizing mine as mate, as partner, as the other half of his soul. The connection was so complete, so overwhelming, that for a moment, I lost all sense of where I ended and he began. "Sarah." My name on his lips was a prayer, a promise, a claim all at once. I looked up at him, seeing my own wonder reflected in his golden eyes. "Is it always like this?" "Never." His hands cupped my face, thumbs stroking over my cheekbones. "I've never felt anything like this." The moment stretched between us, perfect and crystalline. Then the sound of splintering stone shattered the silence. "They've broken through the lower defenses," Kieran said, his body going rigid with alert tension. I could feel it too now, through the bond. The rage and hunger of the wolves above us, the desperate fear of Kieran's pack as they fought to hold the line. "What do? We fight." He moved toward a weapons rack I hadn't noticed before, pulling down a sword that gleamed like silver fire. "But first, we finish what we started." I thought we just did. He turned back to me, and the expression on his face was purely predatory. "That was the blood bond, love. Now comes the real test." "Which is?" "Your first shift." Before I could ask what he meant, pain exploded through my body. Not the gentle awakening I'd experienced upstairs, but something violent and transformative. My bones began to crack and reshape, my muscles stretching and changing. "Don't fight it," Kieran said, his own body beginning to blur and change. "Let your wolf out, Sarah. Let her protect us both." The pain was indescribable, but underneath it was something else, a wild joy, a sense of finally becoming who I was meant to be. Through the agony, I could hear Kieran's wolf howling, calling to mine. And somewhere above us, Elena's voice rang out in warning. "They've found the chamber, Kieran, they're coming." The transformation accelerated. my human form falling away like discarded clothes. When it was over, I stood on 4 legs instead of 2, my new body powerful and graceful and utterly alien. Kieran's wolf was magnificent, larger than any natural wolf, with dark fur and those same golden eyes. When he looked at me, I felt his approval, his pride, his love singing through the bond between us. Beautiful, his voice whispered in my mind. My beautiful mate. Heavy footsteps echoed on the stone stairs. Our enemies had found us. Ready? Kieran asked. I bared my teeth, feeling the unfamiliar weight of fangs in my mouth. Through the bond, I could feel his strength flowing into me, his centuries of experience guiding my new instincts. Ready. The first Shadowclaw wolf burst into the chamber. Just as we moved, the battle was about to begin. Chapter 6. The Alpha's Mate. The first Shadowclaw wolf that burst into the chamber was massive, easily twice the size of any natural wolf, with fur like spilled ink and eyes that burned red in the candlelight. He snarled when he saw us, his lips pulling back to reveal fangs that could tear through steel. Stay behind me, Kieran's voice whispered through our bond. Like hell, I shot back, surprising us both with the vehemence of my response. Something had awakened in me during the transformation, not just my wolf, but something deeper. A fury that burned like wildfire in my veins, ancient and implacable. Through the bond, I felt Kieran's shock at the intensity of it. The Shadowclaw wolf charged. I moved without thinking, my new body responding to instincts that felt older than time. I met him halfway across the chamber, my smaller size giving me speed and agility he couldn't match. We collided in a tangle of claws and fangs, rolling across the stone floor in a blur of violence. Sarah. Kieran's alarm flooded through our connection, but I was already moving, using my momentum to break free from the larger wolf's grasp. As I spun away, something incredible happened. The ancient symbols carved into the chamber walls began to glow, brighter, responding to my presence. The Shadowclaw wolf noticed it too. His red eyes widened, and for the first time I smelled fear on him. Impossible, he snarled, his voice a gravelly rasp. The Blackwood line was extinct. Surprise, I growled back, and the sound of my own voice shocked me. It carried power, the kind of absolute authority that made other wolves instinctively want to submit. 2 more Shadowclaw wolves poured into the chamber, followed by a man in human form. He was tall and lean, with silver hair and cruel pale eyes. When he saw me, his face went through a series of expressions: shock, hunger, and something that might have been awe. Magnus Shadowclaw, Kieran said, moving to stand beside me. Even in wolf form, his voice carried the weight of command. You're trespassing on cross territory, and you're harboring stolen property, Magnus replied, his gaze never leaving me. That wolf belongs to us by right of conquest. She belongs to no one but herself, Kieran snapped. Magnus laughed, the sound echoing off the stone walls. How noble. And how naive. Do you have any idea what you've bonded yourself to, Cross? What power runs in her veins? Through our connection, I felt Kieran's confusion and his growing unease. Whatever Magnus was implying, Kieran didn't know about it either. Enlighten us, I said, stepping forward. The chamber walls pulsed brighter with each step I took. You're not just any Blackwood, Magnus said, his eyes gleaming with avarice. You're the daughter of Lyanna Blackwood, the last true alpha of the Blackwood line, the one the prophecies call the Moonborn. Moonborn? The word felt familiar on my tongue, like something I'd heard in dreams. Born under the hunter's moon, marked by the old gods themselves. Magnus's voice dropped to a whisper. You have the power to command any shifter, regardless of pack loyalty, to force submission from alphas themselves. The revelation hit both Kieran and me like a physical blow. Through our bond, I felt his stunned disbelief warring with protective fury. "You're lying," Kieran said. "Am I?" Magnus gestured to the glowing walls. "The old magic recognizes her. The stones themselves bend to her will." His cruel smile widened. "Imagine what we could accomplish with that power, Cross. Unite all the packs under Shadowclaw rule. Bring order to the chaos of dozens of competing territories." "Under your rule, you mean?" I said. "Under our rule," he corrected. "You would be—" "My mate, of course. The position befits your station." The casual way he said it, as if my marriage to Kieran meant nothing, as if I were a prize to be passed between men, ignited something volcanic inside me. The fury I'd felt during the fight exploded outward, and the chamber walls flared so bright they turned the air itself to gold. "I already have a mate," I snarled. "A political alliance that can be dissolved." Magnus waved dismissively. "What's between you and Cross isn't a true bond. Isn't it?" I let him see exactly what flowed between Kieran and me. The love, the trust, the absolute certainty that we belonged together. I opened the bond wide, letting our connection blaze like a beacon in the supernatural darkness. Magnus staggered backward, his face going white. That's impossible. The Moonborn can't form true bonds. The old texts say—" "The old texts were wrong." Elena's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. She stood at the top of the stairs, battered and bloodied but very much alive. Behind her came the surviving members of Kieran's pack, their eyes blazing with protective fury. "Or," she continued, moving down the stairs with predatory grace, "they were incomplete. The prophecy speaks of a Moonborn who will either unite or destroy. Perhaps they never considered what would happen if she chose love over power." "Elena," Magnus said, inclining his head with mocking courtesy. "Still playing guardian to lost causes, I see." "Still stealing what doesn't belong to you," she replied. "Some things never change." The tension in the chamber ratcheted higher. Magnus's wolves were outnumbered now, but cornered animals were always the most dangerous. "You can't protect her forever," Magnus said to Kieran. "Every pack on the continent will come for her when word spreads. The Moonborn is too valuable to remain free." "Then they'll have to go through me," Kieran replied, his mental voice steel in starlight. "And they'll learn what it means to threaten my mate." Through our bond, I felt something shift in him. Not just protectiveness, but a deep, abiding trust in my strength. He wasn't seeing me as something fragile to be guarded anymore. He was seeing me as his equal, his partner, his other half. "Last chance, Cross," Magnus said. "Give her to us willingly, and your pack lives. Force us to take her, and we'll leave nothing but ash and bone." "Counteroffer," I said, stepping forward until I was directly in front of Magnus. The ancient symbols on the walls pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. "Leave now, and I won't show you exactly what a Moonborn can do when she's properly motivated." For a moment, uncertainty flickered across Magnus's features. Then his expression hardened. "Threats from a child who doesn't even know how to access her power," he sneered. "How disappointing." He gestured to his wolves, and they tensed to attack. That's when I felt it. A presence stirring deep within me, ancient and vast and utterly implacable. Through the bond, I felt Kieran's awe, as he sensed it too. "What is that?" he asked. "I don't know," I replied. "But I think we're about to find out." The presence rose within me like a tide, bringing with it knowledge that felt older than the mountains themselves. Suddenly, I understood what the symbols on the walls meant, felt the power that had been carved into the very stone of this place. This wasn't just a mating chamber. It was a sanctuary, a place where the old gods had once walked among mortals, and I was their heir. "You want to see what a Moonborn can do?" I asked. my voice echoing strangely in the suddenly silent chamber. Let me show you. I reached out with senses I didn't know I possessed, touching the minds of every wolf in the room. Magnus's pack, Kieran's family, even Elena herself. I could feel them all, could sense the wild essence that made them what they were. And with that touch came understanding. I could command them. All of them. Magnus had been right about that. Much. The power was there, vast and terrible and absolute. I could force Magnus and his wolves to kneel, could make them crawl from this place in defeat. But that would make me exactly what he accused me of being, a tyrant ruling through fear and domination. Instead, I chose something else entirely. I opened my heart and let them feel what I felt for Kieran, what he felt for me. The pure, blazing truth of our bond, the love that had transformed two damaged souls into something whole and strong and unbreakable. This is what you'll never understand, I said to Magnus, though my words were meant for every wolf in the chamber. Power without love is just tyranny. Strength without compassion is just brutality. The effect was immediate and devastating. Magnus's wolves whimpered and backed away, their red eyes flickering with confusion and something that might have been longing. Through the supernatural connection, they could feel what they were missing. The bonds of true family, the strength that came from loyalty freely given rather than forced. You have a choice, I said to them. Stay with him and know only fear and ambition, or find packs that will value you for who you are, not what you can do for them. One by one, Magnus's wolves shifted to human form and dropped to their knees, not in submission to me, but in rejection of him. I renounce the Shadowclaw pack, the largest one said, his voice shaking. I claim the right of exile. As do I, said another. Within moments, Magnus stood alone, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. This isn't over, he snarled at me. There are others who won't be swayed by pretty speeches and naive idealism. Then they'll face the same choice, I replied calmly. Love or fear? Unity or domination? The old ways are ending, Magnus. You can either adapt or be left behind. For a moment, I thought he might attack anyway. One last desperate assault driven by wounded pride. But then Elena stepped forward, and I saw something in her eyes that made Magnus visibly flinch. Go, she said quietly. Before I decide that mercy is overrated. He went, shifting to wolf form and fleeing up the stairs like the hounds of hell, were at his heels. In the sudden silence that followed, I became aware that everyone was staring at me. The former Shadowclaw wolves, Elena's pack, Kieran himself, all of them looking at me with expressions of awe and something that might have been fear. Did I just make everything worse? I asked Kieran through our bond. You just proved that you're exactly who I thought you were, he replied, and the love in his mental voice made my heart skip. Someone who chooses compassion over conquest. Someone worth following. But as I looked around the chamber at the faces watching me, I realized that everything had changed. I wasn't just Kieran's mate anymore. Whether I wanted it or not, I had become something else entirely. A leader, a symbol, a focal point for every shifter who dreamed of a better world. The only question was whether I was strong enough to bear that weight. Through our bond, I felt Kieran's unwavering faith in me, his certainty that whatever came next, we would face it together. It would have to be enough, because something told me that our troubles were just beginning. Chapter 7. The weight of Prophecy Dawn was breaking over the mountains when we finally made it back to the main house. The battle had taken its toll. Windows were shattered, furniture overturned, and claw marks scarred the beautiful wooden walls. But the pack had held, and that was what mattered. I walked through the destruction still in my wolf form, reluctant to shift back to human. Everything felt different now, sharper, more intense. I could smell the emotions of every person in the house: relief, exhaustion, curiosity, and underneath it all, a thrumming excitement that made my fur prickle with unease. "You can't stay shifted forever," Kieran's voice whispered through our bond. He patted beside me, his dark fur matted with dirt and blood from the fight. "Watch me," I replied. But even as I said it, I knew he was right. I could feel my human form calling to me, the magic of the transformation pulling me back toward my original shape. "They're afraid of me," I added, sensing the way the pack members we passed watched me with wide eyes and careful distance. "They're in awe of you," Kieran corrected. "There's a difference." But as we climbed the stairs to what I was slowly beginning to think of as our room, I caught fragments of whispered conversations that suggested the situation was more complex than Kieran wanted to admit. Never seen anything like it. "The prophecy says she'll either unite or destroy. Magnus was right about her power. What if she can't control it?" The last comment hit me like a physical blow. Through our bond, I felt Kieran's protective anger flare, but underneath it was a thread of the same concern. What if I couldn't control it? In our room, I finally allowed the transformation to take me back to human form. The shift was easier this time, less painful, but it left me feeling strangely empty, as if something vital had been stripped away. "Here," Kieran said, tossing me one of his shirts. He'd already shifted and dressed in clean clothes, moving with the casual efficiency of someone who'd been doing this for centuries. I pulled the shirt over my head, breathing in his scent. Pine and rain and something uniquely him that made my newly awakened wolf purr with contentment. "How are you feeling?" he asked, settling into the chair by the window. "Like I've been hit by a truck. Several trucks." I sank onto the bed, suddenly, exhausted. "And like everyone downstairs thinks I'm some kind of ticking time bomb." "You heard that?" Enhanced hearing is apparently one of my new party tricks. I looked up at him, noting the careful way he was watching me. Along with the ability to mentally dominate any shifter I meet. That's not terrifying at all. Kieran was quiet for a long moment, his storm gray eyes troubled. "The Moonborn legends are ancient. Most of what we know comes from fragments of stories passed down through oral tradition. But what little we do know suggests that your power isn't just about commanding others. It's about connection, the ability to touch the wild essence that makes us what we are." I thought about what I'd felt in the chamber. That vast presence stirring within me, the sensation of touching every wolf's mind at once. It felt like I could have made them do anything. Made Magnus's wolves attack their own alpha, made your pack kneel at my feet. "But you didn't." "No." I met his eyes. "But what if next time I'm not strong enough to make that choice? What if the power decides for me?" Before Kieran could answer, a soft knock interrupted us. Elena's voice came through the door, carefully neutral. "May I come in? There are things we need to discuss." Kieran and I exchanged glances. Through our bond, I felt his reluctance warring with necessity. "Come in," I called. Elena entered, carrying a tea service and looking far more composed than someone who'd spent the night fighting for her life had any right to. But I could smell the exhaustion on her, along with something else. Worry. "The former Shadowclaw wolves have been asking to speak with you," she said without preamble, setting the tea tray on the small table by the window. "They want to pledge themselves to the Crosspack. All of them? All of them." Elena poured 3 cups of tea, her movements precise and careful. "Which presents us with a problem." "What kind of problem?" Kieran leaned forward, his expression grim. "Pack dynamics. The Crosspack has a specific hierarchy, bonds that have been formed over years or even decades. Integrating 4 new wolves, especially ones who used to be enemies, isn't simple. They're asking to pledge to you specifically," Elena added, offering me a cup. Not to the pack as a whole, to you personally. The tea was herbal, with a hint of something wild and green that reminded me of the forest. But even its soothing warmth couldn't ease the knot of anxiety forming in my stomach. What does that mean? It means, Kieran said slowly, that they want you to be their alpha, not me. You. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. But I don't know anything about being an alpha. I've been a wolf for approximately 12 hours. The Moonborn bloodline carries memories, Elena said gently. Genetic memory passed down through generations. You know more than you think you do. As if to prove her point, I found myself remembering things I'd never learned. The proper way to establish pack hierarchy, the rituals for accepting new members, the delicate balance of authority and care that defined good leadership. This is insane, I muttered, setting down my teacup with shaking hands. It's destiny, Elena corrected, and it's only the beginning. Word of last night will spread. Every pack on the continent will want to see the Moonborn for themselves. Some will come seeking alliance. Others will come seeking to claim or destroy you. Through our bond, I felt Kieran's fierce protectiveness surge. Then they'll face the crosspack. All of us. Will they? Elena asked quietly. Because the pack elders have been asking questions. About the prophecy. About what it means for our future. What kind of questions? Elena's expression grew troubled. The prophecy speaks of the Moonborn uniting or destroying the shifter world, but it doesn't specify which world she'll choose to preserve. The implication hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. I could feel Kieran's shock through our bond, his sudden understanding of what Elena wasn't quite saying. They think I might choose the human world over the shifter one, I said. You were raised human. Your loyalties, your understanding of right and wrong, it's all based on human morality. Elena's voice was carefully neutral, but I could smell the fear underneath. Some of the elders worry that when the time comes to choose, you'll side with humanity against us. That's ridiculous, Kieran said, his voice sharp with anger. She's one of us now. The bond ties her to you, Elena interrupted. But you're half human yourself, nephew. Your mother was human, your understanding of the world shaped by both sides of your heritage. I stared at Elena, pieces of the puzzle finally clicking into place. That's why the pack elders wanted this marriage, not just for political protection, but because they thought Kieran could influence me, keep me loyal to the shifter world. And now they're wondering if that influence goes both ways, Elena confirmed. If your humanity might make him choose the human world when the time comes. The room fell silent, except for the distant sounds of the pack cleaning up from the night's battle. Through the window, I could see wolves in human form working to repair the damage, their movements efficient and coordinated. A family working together to rebuild their home. What do you think? I asked Elena. About the prophecy. About me. She studied me for a long moment, her ancient eyes seeing more than I was comfortable with. I think, she said finally, that prophecies are tricky things. They tell us what might happen, not what will happen. And they never account for the one thing that changes everything. Which is love. She smiled, and for the first time since entering the room, she looked genuinely happy. The prophecy speaks of choice, of unity or destruction. But it was written by beings who understood power and politics, not love. They couldn't predict that the Moonborn would find her mate before her power fully awakened. What difference does that make? All the difference in the world, Kieran said, and through our bond, I felt his sudden understanding. Because you're not just the Moonborn anymore. You're half of something larger. We both are. I looked between them, sensing I was missing something important. I don't understand. Elena leaned forward, her expression intense. True mating bonds don't just connect two individuals, child. They create something new, a shared consciousness that's greater than the sum of its parts. The prophecy speaks of one who will unite or destroy, Kieran continued, his eyes beginning to glow with golden light. But it never considered what might happen if that one became part of a mated pair, if the choice wasn't made by a single individual, but by two souls sharing one heart. The implications were staggering. Through our bond, I could feel Kieran's thoughts as clearly as my own, his memories mixing with mine until it was sometimes hard to tell where I ended and he began. So the question isn't whether I'll choose humans or shifters, I said slowly. It's whether we'll find a way to choose both. Exactly. Elena sat back, satisfaction clear in her expression. Which is why the pack elders are nervous. Change is never easy, especially for those who've lived by the old ways for centuries. A new knock at the door interrupted us. This time it was Lydia, her expression urgent. Elena, you need to come quickly. We have visitors. Shadowclaw? No. Lydia's eyes flicked to me, wide with something that looked like awe. The Council of Alphas. All of them. They're requesting an audience with the Moonborn. Elena went very still. All of them? Representatives from every major pack on the continent. They arrived an hour ago with formal banners and everything. Lydia's voice dropped to a whisper. They want to test her, Elena, to see if the prophecy is real. Through our bond, I felt Kieran's wolf surge to the surface, protective and fierce. They want to use her. They want to understand her, Elena corrected, but I could smell her own worry. The question is whether we're ready for that conversation. I stood, squaring my shoulders as the weight of destiny settled around me like a mantle. 3 days ago, I'd been a nobody running from my father's debts. Now I was apparently the focal point of supernatural politics for an entire continent. There's only one way to find out, I said. Through our bond, I felt Kieran's pride and terror in equal measure. Whatever came next, we would face it together. But first, I needed to learn exactly what it meant to be the Moonborn, and whether the world was ready for what Kieran and I might become together. Chapter 8. The Council's Test. The Great Hall had been transformed since the night before. Gone were the scattered furniture and battle debris, replaced by a formal arrangement that spoke of ancient ceremony. 7 massive chairs had been arranged, in a semicircle, each one bearing the carved sigil of a different pack. Behind each chair stood its alpha, their faces masks of barely contained curiosity and calculation. I paused at the entrance, suddenly very aware that I was still wearing Kieran's shirt and a pair of hastily borrowed jeans. Not exactly the attire for meeting the most powerful shifters on the continent. You look perfect, Kieran's voice whispered through our bond. He stood beside me in formal black, every inch the alpha, but I could feel his nerves matching my own. Look like I got dressed in the dark. You look like someone who spent the night defending her family. His mental voice carried warmth and pride. That matters more than any fancy dress. Elena appeared at my other side, her own formal attire impeccable despite the night's chaos. Remember, she murmured, you are not on trial here. This is a meeting of equals. Equals? I looked at the assembled alphas, men and women who radiated power like heat from a forge, each one commanding hundreds or even thousands of shifters. I've been a wolf for exactly one night. And in that one night, you've already changed the course of shifter politics, Elena replied. That makes you far more than equal. The conversations in the hall died as we entered. 7 pairs of eyes tracked our movement, and I could feel the weight of their scrutiny like a physical thing. Through our bond, I sensed Kieran's protective instincts flaring, his wolf ready to place itself between me and any perceived threat. Easy, I told him. I can handle this. I know you can. That doesn't mean I have to like it. The alpha in the center chair rose as we approached. She was a woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked auburn hair and the kind of presence that made rooms go quiet. Her scent carried hints of mountain pine and old snow. "Sarah Blackwood," she said, inclining her head slightly. "I am Morgana Silverpeak, first speaker of the council. We welcome you." "Thank you." I managed to keep my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. Though I have to admit, I'm not entirely sure why I'm here. A murmur ran through the assembled alphas. Some sounded amused, others concerned. Morgana's expression remained neutral. "You're here because your very existence has disrupted the balance we've maintained for 3 decades, said the alpha to her left. He was younger, maybe 40, with dark skin and eyes like burning coals. "I'm Demon Nightfall of the Eastern Territories. Since word of your awakening spread, I've had 6 different packs request permission to cross my lands to reach you, and I've had 3 formal challenges to my authority," added another alpha, a blonde woman with Nordic features and ice-blue eyes. "Astrid Frostborn of the Northern Reaches. My wolves are asking why they should follow me when the Moonborn walks among us again." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "I never asked anyone to follow me." "Doesn't matter," said a gruff voice from the far end. The speaker was built like a bear, with gray-streaked hair and scars crisscrossing his arms. "Marcus Ironwood, Rocky Mountain Territory. Power like yours doesn't get to stay neutral. The question is what you plan to do with it." Through our bond, I felt Kieran's tension spike. This was what he'd been afraid of, the moment when my power would force choices none of us were ready to make. "That's why we're here," Morgana said, settling back into her chair. "To understand the extent of your abilities and your intentions. You want to test me. We want to know if you're the salvation the prophecy promises or the destruction it warns against," said another alpha. This one was younger than the rest, maybe 30, with auburn hair and the lean build of a natural predator. "Cameron Redclaw, of the Southern Marshlands. My pack has already split over whether to seek your alliance or prepare for war against you." The bluntness of the statement hit me like a physical blow. "War?" "The prophecy is clear," Astrid said, her voice cold as winter wind. "The Moonborn will either unite all shifters under one rule or see our entire civilization destroyed. There's no middle ground." "Maybe the prophecy is wrong," I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I could feel that ancient presence stirring within me, responding to the tension in the room. "Prophecies written in the old tongue don't lie," Marcus rumbled. "They just don't always mean what we think they mean." "Which brings us to the test," Morgana said. "We need to understand the nature of your power, whether it's truly the force described in the ancient texts." I looked around the semicircle of faces, seeing curiosity, fear, hope, and calculation in equal measure. "What kind of test?" "Nothing harmful," Elena said quickly, shooting a warning look at the assembled alphas. "They're proposing a demonstration of your abilities under controlled circumstances." "A game," Demon added with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. 7 alphas, each one commanding their wolf to resist your influence. If you are truly the Moonborn, you should be able to make us submit regardless of our willingness. The implications were staggering. Through our bond, I felt Kieran's alarm. "They want you to dominate them," he said, "to prove your power by forcing submission from the most powerful alphas on the continent." "I can't do that," I replied. "I won't. It's everything I stood against last night. I know, but they don't understand that yet." "And if I refuse?" I asked aloud. "Then we return to our territories knowing that either you lack the power the prophecy describes, or you lack the will to use it," Morgana said. "Either way, the uncertainty ends." "Along with any chance of voluntary alliance," Cameron added. "If you won't demonstrate your abilities, some of us will assume you're hiding weakness. Others will assume you're hiding something worse." I could see the trap closing around me. Refuse the test, and I'd be seen as either powerless or duplicitous. Accept it, and I'd be forced to dominate 7 of the most respected leaders in the shifter world. The exact kind of tyrannical display I'd rejected with Magnus. There has to be another way. I told Kieran through our bond. If there is, we'll find it. Together. His certainty steadied me, and suddenly I understood what Elena had meant about the prophecy not accounting for mated pairs. I wasn't facing this alone. Whatever I chose, whatever I did, Kieran would be part of it. I'll take your test, I said, and felt the temperature in the room shift. But with modifications. Morgana's eyebrows rose. Modifications? You want to understand my power. Fine, but I'm not going to force submission from anyone. I stepped forward, letting that ancient presence within me unfurl just enough to make the air itself seem to thicken. Instead, I'm going to show you what unity actually looks like. Sarah, Elena said, warning in her voice. But I was already moving, letting my consciousness expand the way it had in the sacred chamber. Instead of reaching for the Alpha's minds with force, I opened my own thoughts, letting them feel what flowed between Kieran and me. The bond between us blazed like a beacon. In the supernatural darkness, love and trust and absolute unity of purpose. But more than that, they could feel how that bond had changed us both, made us stronger than either of us could be alone. The effect was immediate. Several of the Alphas gasped, their eyes widening as they experienced, even secondhand, what a true mating bond felt like. I heard Astrid whisper something in what sounded like Norwegian, her voice thick with wonder. "This is what I offer," I said, my voice carrying to every corner of the hall. Not domination, not submission, partnership. Unity built on choice rather than force. Through the connection, I let them feel my memories of the night before. The moment when Magnus's wolves had chosen exile over tyranny, the way they'd knelt not in defeat, but in hope of something better. The old ways demanded that the strong rule through fear, I continued. But what if there was another path? What if unity came not from conquest but from connection? You're taking a huge risk, Kieran warned through our bond. So did my mother when she chose love over duty. So did you when you chose to trust me. I opened the connection wider, letting the Alphas feel not just my bond with Kieran, but my growing connection to his pack. Elena's maternal protectiveness, Lydia's bright curiosity, even the former Shadowclaw wolves' desperate hope for belonging. I can force you to kneel, I said, and let them feel the vast power that lurked beneath my conscious control. But kneeling subjects serve out of fear. They rebel when they think they can win. They betray when it serves their interests. I pulled the power back, wrapping it in the love and trust I felt for Kieran, for Elena, for the pack that had welcomed me as family. Partners serve out of choice. They stand firm when times are hard. They sacrifice for the good of the whole, because they believe in what they're building. The hall had gone completely silent. I could smell emotions shifting, changing. Fear transforming into curiosity, suspicion melting into something that might have been hope. So here's my proposal, I said. Not a test of my ability to dominate, but an invitation to explore what we could build together. A confederation of packs bound not by force but by shared purpose. And what purpose would that be? Morgana asked, her voice carefully neutral. I looked around the semicircle of faces, seeing centuries of accumulated wisdom and power. Leaders who'd spent their lives protecting their people, maintaining the delicate balance between the human and shifter worlds. Survival, I said simply. The human world is changing. Technology is advancing. How much longer before they discover us? How much longer before fear drives them to try to eliminate what they don't understand? Through our bond, I felt Kieran's surprise. This wasn't what either of us had planned to say, but as the words left my mouth, I knew they were true. The prophecy speaks of unity or destruction, I continued. But maybe those aren't opposite choices. Maybe unity is the only way to avoid destruction. Not just for shifters, but for everyone. You're proposing an alliance, Cameron said, leaning forward in his chair. I'm proposing evolution. I gestured to Kieran, to Elena, to the mixed pack we'd created just by existing. We can't change what's coming, but we can choose how we face it. Marcus scratched his grizzled chin, his expression thoughtful. And you believe your power can create this confederation? I believe my power can show us what's possible, but real unity has to be chosen freely, built on trust and mutual respect. I met each alpha's gaze in turn. I can open your minds to new possibilities. I can help you feel what others feel, understand what drives them. But I can't make you care about anyone but yourselves. That choice has to come from you. The silence stretched until Astrid finally spoke. Show us, she said simply. I looked to Kieran, seeing his trust and love shining in his storm-gray eyes. Through our bond, I felt his absolute faith in whatever choice I made. Taking a deep breath, I reached out with my consciousness, not to dominate or control, but to connect. To let these 7 powerful beings feel what I felt when I looked at the world through both human and shifter eyes. The moment our minds touched, everything changed. Instead of forcing their submission, I invited them to share the vision of what we could become. And for the first time in 30 years, the Council of Alphas began to dream of a future built on hope rather than fear. Chapter 9. Bonds forged and tested. The connection between 7 of the most powerful minds on the continent was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. For a moment, I was not just Sarah. I was Morgana, feeling the weight of leadership across 3 mountain ranges, Demon wrestling with the isolation of his desert territories, Astrid carrying the ancient grief of her people's losses to human expansion. And through it all, like a steady heartbeat, was Kieran's presence in my mind. His strength anchoring me as consciousness threatened to scatter across too many perspectives. Stay with me, his voice whispered through our bond. Don't lose yourself in them. The vision I shared wasn't of conquest or domination, but of possibility. I showed them cities where shifters and humans worked side by side, their children growing up together without fear. Research facilities where shifter-enhanced senses helped detect diseases before they spread, where human technology augmented shifter healing abilities. A world where secrecy wasn't necessary because understanding had taken its place. But I also showed them the alternative. The inexorable advance of satellite surveillance, genetic testing, artificial intelligence that could pattern match behavior in ways that made hiding increasingly impossible. The choice wasn't whether to reveal themselves, but when and how. When I finally withdrew from their minds, the silence in the Great Hall was deafening. Several of the alphas were pale, trembling slightly from the intensity of the shared experience. Astrid had tears streaming down her face while Marcus sat rigid as stone, his scarred hands clenched into fists. Demon started, then stopped, shaking his head as if to clear it. That's not possible. Humans and shifters working together? They'd never accept us. Some wouldn't, I agreed, my voice hoarse from the effort of maintaining 7 simultaneous connections. But some would. The question is whether we give them the chance to choose, or wait until fear makes the choice for them. Through our bond, I felt Kieran's quiet pride mixed with concern. The demonstration had taken more out of me than I'd expected, and my legs were starting to shake with exhaustion. The girl speaks sense, Marcus said slowly, his gravelly voice thoughtful. My territory borders 3 major cities. Every year they push further into the wilderness. Every year it gets harder to hide what we are. But the risks, Astrid protested, though her voice lacked conviction. If we're wrong about human acceptance, then we're no worse off than we'll be in 10 years anyway. Cameron interrupted. She's right about the technology. I've had 3 near exposures in the last 6 months alone. Hikers with camera phones, park rangers with night vision equipment, researchers tracking wildlife migration patterns. Morgana had remained silent through the exchange, her pale green eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of centuries. "The vision you showed us," she said carefully. "It wasn't entirely fabrication, was it? You've seen something. A glimpse of an actual future." The question hung in the air like a challenge. Through our bond, I felt Kieran's surprise. He hadn't known about the dreams that had been coming to me since the bonding ritual. Fragments of possible futures that felt more like memories than imagination. "I don't know," I admitted. "Since the mating bond completed, I've been having dreams, visions. I can't tell if they're prophecy or just hope dressed up as possibility. The Blackwood line has always carried the gift of farsight," Elena said quietly from where she stood behind our chairs. "Your grandmother could see 3 days into the future with perfect clarity. Your mother could sense the emotional currents that would shape the next year's politics." "And the Moonborn?" Morgana asked. "The legends say she sees all possible futures," Elena replied, "and has the power to choose which one becomes reality." The weight of that revelation settled over the hall like a suffocating blanket. Through our bond, I felt Kieran's protective instincts surge, his wolf ready to fight anything that threatened my peace of mind. "That's—" I started, then stopped. Because deep down, I could feel the truth of it. The dreams weren't random. They were showing me paths, choices, moments where everything could change based on a single decision. "Overwhelming," Demon finished for me, his expression sympathetic. "Power like that, it would drive most beings mad." "But not a mated pair," Morgana said, her gaze shifting to Kieran. "The bond would share the burden, wouldn't it? Split the visions between 2 minds instead of 1. "Is that what's been happening?" I asked Kieran through our connection. "Have you been seeing them too?" "Fragments," he admitted. "Pieces that don't make sense until you put them together. I thought they were just stress dreams." "This changes everything," Cameron said, leaning forward in his chair. "If she can actually see the consequences of our choices, then she becomes a resource every pack on the continent will try to claim," Marcus interrupted grimly. "Or eliminate if they can't control her. Which is why the Confederation idea isn't just idealistic nonsense," Astrid said slowly. "It's necessity. A mutual protection agreement that makes her everyone's ally instead of anyone's property." I felt a flutter of hope, quickly tempered by the reality of what they were proposing. "You're talking about fundamentally restructuring shifter society, abandoning thousands of years of territorial independence." "We're talking about survival," Morgana said bluntly. "Yours and ours." She stood, her formal robes rustling with the movement. "The question is whether we're brave enough to try something that's never been attempted before." One by one, the other alphas rose from their chairs. I could smell the mix of fear and determination rolling off them, the weight of decisions that would affect thousands of lives. "I'll need to consult with my pack elders," Demon said. "But in principle, yes, the Eastern Territories would be willing to explore this confederation. The Northern Reaches as well," Astrid added. "Though there will be resistance. Change always faces resistance." Similar murmurs of cautious agreement came from the other alphas, until only Marcus remained seated, his expression troubled. "You have concerns," Kieran observed. "I have questions," Marcus corrected. "About the boy." "What boy?" "The Shadowclaw heir, Magnus's son." Marcus's scarred face was grim. "He wasn't with his father last night, which means he's still out there, still loyal to the old ways, and he's not going to accept his father's defeat quietly." Through our bond, I felt Kieran's sudden tension. Darius Shadowclaw. I'd forgotten about him. Young, ambitious, and thoroughly convinced that might makes. "Right," Marcus continued. "He'll see this confederation as weakness, as betrayal of everything shifters are supposed to represent." "How dangerous is he?" I asked. Dangerous enough. Morgana's expression was troubled. Darius has been building alliances with the more traditional packs, those who believe shifters should rule over humans, not alongside them. He's also been spreading rumors, Cameron added reluctantly, about the Moonborn, about what her power represents. What kind of rumors? That you're not really trying to save shifter society, Astrid said quietly. That you're trying to destroy it from within. Weaken us with human sentiment until we're easy prey for their technology and weapons. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Through our bond, I felt Kieran's anger flare, his protective instincts surging. That's insane, he growled. Is it? Marcus asked bluntly. 3 days ago, she was fully human, raised in their world, shaped by their values. Now she's proposing we abandon our ancestral ways and trust the species that spent the last few centuries destroying everything wild and free. He held up a hand when Kieran started to protest. I'm not saying I believe it, but I understand why some might. So what are you suggesting? I asked. That we be very careful about how we proceed, Morgana said. The Confederation is a good idea, but if we move too fast, we'll give Darius the ammunition he needs to turn it into a civil war. And if we move too slowly? Then he consolidates his power and attacks anyway, Demon said grimly. At least if we move fast, we control the narrative. Through our bond, I felt Kieran weighing options, his strategic mind calculating risks and benefits. The burden of leadership was something he'd carried for years, but now that weight was shared between us. What do you think? I asked him. I think, he replied, that we're about to find out what it really means to change the world. There's something else, Elena said from behind us, her voice carrying a note of urgency that made everyone turn. A message arrived while you were connecting. From the Shadowclaw territory. She held out a piece of expensive paper, sealed with black wax. The seal showed a wolf's head surrounded by thorns, the ancient sigil of the Shadowclaw pack. Kieran took the message, breaking the seal with deliberate care. As he read, his expression grew progressively darker. What does it say? I asked. He looked up, his storm-gray eyes filled with a mixture of anger and grim determination. It's a formal challenge, to both of us. What kind of challenge? Trial by combat, he said, handing me the letter. Darius is claiming that our mating bond is illegitimate, that I coerced you into accepting it. He's demanding the right to fight for you. My hands shook as I read the formal words, written in an archaic style that spoke of traditions older than countries. And if he wins? Then our bond is declared null, Kieran said quietly. And you become his mate instead. The temperature in the hall seemed to drop 10 degrees. Through our bond, I felt Kieran's absolute determination to die before letting that happen, matched by my own fierce refusal to let anyone tear us apart. When? Morgana asked. Tomorrow night, Kieran replied. At the neutral ground, under the full moon. The timing isn't coincidental, Elena said grimly. Full moon combat is governed by the oldest laws. Magic is stronger, bonds are tested, and victory goes to the one whose wolf is truest to its nature. Then we fight, I said simply. 7 pairs of eyes turned to me in shock. Sarah, Astrid said carefully, trial by combat is traditionally between the males. I wouldn't be what? Allowed to fight for my own fate? I stood, feeling power ripple through me like electricity. He's challenging our bond, both of us, so both of us will answer. Through our connection, I felt Kieran's pride and terror warring in his chest. The demonstration for the council had shown him exactly how powerful I was becoming, and how much I still had to learn about controlling it. The Confederation will have to wait, Morgana said. If you lose tomorrow night, We won't lose, I said, taking Kieran's hand. Through our bond, I felt his strength flowing into me, just as mine flowed into him. We can't. Too much depends. On it. Then we'll stand with you, Demon said firmly. All of us. Whatever happens tomorrow night, you won't face it alone. The other alphas nodded agreement, and for a moment, I could see the future we were trying to build. Shifters standing together instead of apart, strength through unity instead of dominance. But first, we had to survive the night, and prove that love really was stronger than the old ways of fear and conquest. Chapter 10. Under the Hunter's Moon. The neutral ground lay in a valley between 3 territories, marked by ancient standing stones that hummed with old magic. As we approached in the pre-dawn darkness, I could see torches already burning in a wide circle, their flames dancing in the cold mountain air. Dozens of shifters had gathered, representatives from every major pack on the continent, drawn by news of the challenge that would determine the future of our kind. I sat in the passenger seat of Kieran's truck, trying to calm the butterflies, rioting in my stomach. The past 24 hours had been a blur of preparation. Elena teaching me the formal rules of trial by combat, the pack elders reluctantly accepting my decision to fight alongside Kieran, and long hours of training to help me access my power without losing control. Nervous? Kieran asked through our bond, his mental voice gentle. Terrified, I admitted. What if I can't do it? What if when the moment comes I freeze? Then I'll be there. His hand found mine in the darkness, warm and steady. We're not just fighting for ourselves tonight, Sarah. We're fighting for everyone who believes love is stronger than tradition. Through our bond, I felt his own fear, not of losing the fight, but of losing me. The thought of Darius claiming me as his mate made Kieran's wolf snarl with protective fury. That's not going to happen, I told him firmly. Whatever else goes wrong tonight, I'm not becoming anyone's prize. We parked at the edge of the gathering, joining Elena and the other cross-pack members who'd come to witness the trial. As we walked toward the circle of stones, conversations died and heads turned. I could smell the mix of anticipation, curiosity, and fear rolling off the assembled shifters. The Moonborn, someone whispered. She's smaller than I expected. But did you feel the power when she walked past? They say she can command any wolf, regardless of pack loyalty. I kept my chin up and my expression calm, even as my hands shook with nerves. The formal challenge clothing Elena had prepared felt strange. A simple white dress that left my arms and legs free for movement, with symbols embroidered in silver thread that caught the torchlight. Kieran walked beside me in similar white clothing, looking every inch the alpha he was. But through our bond, I could feel his tension matching my own. At the center of the circle stood Darius Shadowclaw. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 25, with the kind of dark good looks that belonged on movie screens. But there was something cold in his pale eyes, something that spoke of cruelty dressed up as strength. When he saw us approaching, his lips curved in a smile that made my skin crawl. "Kieran Cross," he called out, his voice carrying easily across the gathering. "I see you've brought your acquisition." Kieran's growl was low and dangerous. "Watch your tongue, boy." "Boy?" Darius laughed. "I'm old enough to recognize a false bond when I see one. Tell me, Moonborn." He turned those cold eyes to me. "How much did he pay your father for you? Was it enough to make you pretend to love him?" The casual cruelty of the words hit like physical blows. But before I could respond, Kieran stepped forward. "You want to question our bond?" he said, his voice deadly quiet. "Let's settle it properly." An elderly woman stepped into the circle. The judge, Elena had called her. She was ancient even by shifter standards, her white hair braided with small bones and her eyes milky with cataracts. But when she spoke, her voice carried absolute authority. "By the old laws, trial by combat has been called," she announced. Darius Shadowclaw challenges the legitimacy of the mating bond between Kieran Cross and Sarah Blackwood, claiming coercion and false consent. She turned those blind eyes toward us. How do the accused answer? We answer with our lives, Kieran said formally. Let combat determine the truth. And I invoke the right of the bonded, I added, stepping forward. If our bond is being questioned, then both parties have the right to defend it. A murmur ran through the crowd. The judge tilted her head, considering. The Moonborn speaks truth, she said finally. Both may fight, as both are challenged. Her blind gaze seemed to find Darius. Do you accept these terms? For a moment, uncertainty flickered across his features. He'd been expecting to face Kieran alone, not both of us together, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. I accept, he said, though it seems unsporting to gang up on a single opponent. Then, choose your allies, the judge replied calmly. The law allows for seconds in trial by combat. Darius's smile turned predatory. Marcus Shadowclaw, Victor Ironhide. Two figures stepped out of the crowd, both large, both radiating the kind of controlled violence that made the air itself seem thicker. I recognized Marcus as one of the wolves who'd been with Magnus the night before. Victor was unfamiliar, but the scars covering his arms and the way other shifters gave him space spoke of a reputation for brutality. 3 against 2, Kieran said, his voice flat. How traditional. We can do this, I told him through our bond, though my mouth had gone dry. Together we're stronger than any of them. I know. But if something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you. The certainty in my mental voice surprised both of us. I won't let it. The judge raised her staff, and the torches around the circle flared brighter. Combat begins at moonrise. Until then, the challenged may prepare. As the crowd dispersed to the edges of the circle, Elena approached with a small vial of dark liquid. What is it? I asked. Something to help you access your wolf more quickly, she explained. The moon will make shifting easier, but this will make it instantaneous. I drank the bitter concoction, feeling heat spread through my veins. Already I could feel my wolf stirring, eager for the hunt. Remember, Elena said quietly, this isn't just about winning. It's about proving that your bond is real, that love can triumph over force. Don't let them drag you down to their level. Across the circle, I could see Darius conferring with his allies, their voices low and urgent. Through the growing connection to my wolf, I caught fragments of their scent, aggression, confidence, and something else. Something that made my newly awakened instincts bristle with warning. They're planning something, I told Kieran. I know. I can smell it too. His expression was grim. They're not just here to fight. They're here to make an example. The moon began to rise above the mountains, full and heavy and silver bright. As its light touched the circle of stones, power thrummed through the air like electricity. I could feel every shifter present responding to it, their wolves stirring to wakefulness. Combat begins, the judge called. The transformation took me like a breaking wave. One moment I was human, the next I was standing on 4 legs, my wolf form larger and more powerful than I remembered. Beside me, Kieran's wolf was magnificent, dark fur gleaming in the moonlight, golden eyes blazing with protective fury. Across the circle, our opponents had also shifted. Darius was sleek and deadly, with silver-gray fur and those same cold, pale eyes. His companions were built for brutality, massive forms designed to tear and crush. Together, Kieran's voice whispered, "Through our bond, don't let them separate us." The attack came without warning. Marcus and Victor split apart, trying to flank us while Darius charged straight ahead. But they'd underestimated what a true mating bond could accomplish. I didn't have to think about coordinating with Kieran. We moved as one entity with 2 bodies, each anticipating the other's actions. When Victor lunged for my throat, Kieran was already there to intercept. When Marcus tried to circle behind Kieran, I met him head-on. The crowd around the circle was shouting now, caught up in the primal excitement of the hunt. But through the noise, I could hear something else. Whispered conversations in the old tongue, power building at the edges of my consciousness. "Something's wrong," I told Kieran as we fought. "They're not just fighting to win. They're preparing something else." Before he could respond, Darius broke away from the melee and began to speak. Not the growls and snarls of wolf communication, but actual words, a chant in the ancient language that made the air itself seem to thicken. "He's calling on the old bindings." Elena's voice cut through the chaos from the edge of the circle. "The laws that predate consent." Horror washed through me as I understood what was happening. Darius wasn't just trying to win the fight. He was invoking magic that would let him claim me regardless of my wishes, binding me to him through force and ancient law. "Not happening." I snarled through our bond. Power exploded out of me like a shockwave, raw and primal and absolutely furious. The ancient stones around the circle began to glow, responding to the moon-born blood in my veins. But this wasn't the controlled demonstration I'd given the council. This was pure, unleashed rage. Darius's chant faltered as my power hit him, but he didn't stop. If anything, he seemed to draw strength from the magical chaos, his own wolf growing larger and more monstrous. He's been preparing for this, Kieran realized, finding ways to counter moon-born power. The realization sent ice through my veins. This wasn't just a challenge to our bond. It was an ambush, carefully planned and executed by someone who'd studied my abilities and found ways to neutralize them. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated what Kieran and I could do together. Instead of fighting Darius's magic, I opened the bond between us completely. Let Kieran feel the full extent of my power, while I drew on his centuries of experience and control. We became something new. Not just two wolves fighting side by side, but a single consciousness with access to abilities neither of us possessed alone. The effect was immediate and devastating. Marcus and Victor, caught in the wave of our combined presence, stumbled and fell. Around the circle, every shifter present felt the force of a true mating bond at full strength, love and trust and absolute unity of purpose blazing like a second sun. Darius's magical working shattered like glass. "Impossible," he snarled, but there was fear in his voice now. "The old laws are exactly that," I said, my wolf's voice carrying across the circle with supernatural clarity. "Old. The world has moved beyond laws that treat people as property. Now," Kieran said through our bond. We attacked as one, moving faster than thought, driven by the power of our connection. Darius tried to flee, but there was nowhere to run within the circle of stones. When we brought him down, it was with the controlled force of justice rather than the wild fury of revenge. As the 3 Shadowclaw wolves lay defeated at our feet, the judge stepped forward. "Combat is concluded," she announced. "The bond between Kieran Cross and Sarah Blackwood is proven true. Let none question it again." The cheers from the assembled shifters were deafening. But through the celebration, I could see something else. In their faces. Not just acknowledgement of our victory, but recognition of what it represented. A new kind of strength. A new way forward. As Kieran and I shifted back to human form, still breathing hard from the fight, he pulled me into his arms. "That," he said against my hair, "was definitely not how I expected our honeymoon to go." I laughed, giddy with relief and leftover adrenaline. Well, we did promise each other it would never be boring. Around us, the alphas who'd witnessed our demonstration were already deep in conversation, planning the confederation that would reshape their world. Change was coming, not through conquest or domination, but through the radical idea that love could be stronger than fear. But as I looked at Darius being helped away by his defeated allies, I knew this was only the beginning. There would be others who opposed the new way, others who preferred the old laws of might makes right. Through our bond, I felt Kieran's thoughts echoing my own. Whatever came next, we would face it together. And that, more than any prophecy or power, was enough. Chapter 11. The New Dawn. 3 weeks after the trial, I stood on the balcony of what had once been just Kieran's room, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. Below in the courtyard, representatives from 6 different packs were setting up for another day of Confederation negotiations. The sight should have filled me with satisfaction, proof that our vision was becoming reality. Instead, I felt hollow. "You're up early," Kieran's voice whispered through our bond, followed by the warm press of his body against my back as he wrapped his arms around me. "Couldn't sleep," I replied, leaning into his embrace. Too many voices. It was becoming a problem. Ever since the trial, my connection to other shifters had grown stronger, more invasive. I could feel the emotions of every pack member in the house, their dreams bleeding into mine, their fears and hopes creating a constant background hum in my consciousness. "The dreams again?" Kieran asked aloud, his breath warm against my ear. I nodded, not trusting my voice. The visions were coming more frequently now, fragments of possible futures spinning through my mind like a kaleidoscope of what might be. Some beautiful, some terrifying, all of them feeling equally real. "Tell me," he said softly. "I saw us in a city," I began, my voice barely above a whisper. "Standing in front of a crowd of humans and shifters. You were giving a speech about coexistence, and they were listening. Really listening." I paused, swallowing hard. But I also saw that same city burning, saw human soldiers hunting shifters through the streets while our people fled or fought back in desperation. Through our bond, I felt Kieran's concern spike. The visions had been growing darker lately, showing more paths that led to conflict and destruction. "Both possibilities exist," he said, his arms tightening around me. "That's why we're working so hard to choose the right path. But what if we choose wrong? What if all of this, the Confederation, the integration plans, the hope we're building, what if it's all just making things worse?" Before he could answer, a knock interrupted us. Elena's voice came through the door, carefully neutral, but carrying an undercurrent of urgency. "Sarah, Kieran, there's someone here to see you. She says it's about the prophecy." I exchanged glances with Kieran, seeing my own apprehension reflected in his storm-gray eyes. We'd been expecting this. Ever since word of the Moonborn's return had spread, scholars and seers had been making pilgrimages to our territory, each claiming to have new information about my destiny. Most had been charlatans or desperate pack, members seeking favor. But something in Elena's tone suggested this visitor was different. "Send her up," Kieran called, already moving to grab clothes from the dresser. I pulled on jeans and one of his sweaters, the familiar scent helping to ground me as my enhanced senses picked up the approaching stranger. She smelled of old books and dried herbs, with an underlying wildness that spoke of power carefully contained. The woman who entered our room was ancient even by shifter standards, her silver hair so pale it was almost white, her violet eyes holding depths that seemed to go on forever. She moved with the careful precision of someone whose body had outlived several lifetimes, but there was nothing fragile about the presence that filled the space around her. "Moonborn," she said, inclining her head with formal respect. "Alpha Cross. I am Vera Nightwhisper, keeper of the old texts." Elena appeared behind her, carrying a tea service with hands that trembled slightly. I could smell her nervousness, along with something that might have been awe. "Vera is the oldest living scholar of the prophecies," Elena explained as she set down the tray. "She's traveled from the Sacred Grove to speak with you." "The Sacred Grove," Even I knew that name, the hidden sanctuary where the most ancient and powerful artifacts of shifter culture were kept. For someone to make that journey, especially someone of Vera's apparent age, meant this was important. "Please sit," I said, gesturing to the chairs by the window. "You've come a long way." Vera settled herself with careful dignity, her violet gaze never leaving my face. "I have come because the texts are changing." The simple statement sent chills down my spine. Changing how? "The prophecy of the Moonborn has existed for 3,000 years, Vera explained, accepting a cup of tea from Elena with grateful hands. "Written in the old tongue on stone tablets that have never altered, never faded, until 3 weeks ago. The night of the trial," Kieran said. "The very moment you and your mate defeated Darius Shadowclaw, new words appeared on the stones." Vera reached into her robes and withdrew a leather-bound journal. "I've spent the last 3 weeks translating them." My hands shook as I took the journal, Kieran reading over my shoulder as I opened it to a page covered in careful handwriting. "When love conquers law and bond breaks binding, the Moonborn's true path shall be revealed. Not one future, but all. Futures rest in her hands, shaped by the choices of those who stand beside her. The world of shadow and the world of light need not remain divided, but unity comes only through sacrifice. The Moonborn must choose. Preserve the old ways in new forms, or birth something entirely different from the ashes of what was." I read the passage 3 times before looking up at Vera. "That's not exactly clearer than the original prophecy." A smile ghosted across her ancient features. "Prophecies rarely are, but there are clues in the translation that reveal more than the surface meaning." She leaned forward, her violet eyes intense. "The phrase sacrifice here doesn't mean death or loss in the traditional sense. In the old tongue, it carries the meaning of transformation, giving up one form of existence to embrace another." "What kind of transformation?" Kieran asked. "That is what I've come to help you discover." Vera's gaze moved between us, studying our faces with scholarly precision. "But first, I need to understand the full extent of your abilities, both of you." Over the next hour, Vera questioned us with the thoroughness of someone who'd spent millennia studying supernatural phenomena. She wanted to know about our dreams, our shared consciousness, the way our bond had evolved since the mating ritual. Most disturbing, she seemed particularly interested in the moments when our individual identities had become blurred. "You're becoming something new," she said finally, setting down her empty teacup. "Not just a mated pair, but a hybrid consciousness. Part human, part shifter, part something else entirely." "Something else?" I asked. "The legends speak of beings who existed before the separation, when humans and shifters and other supernatural creatures lived together in harmony. They were bridges between worlds, able to exist fully in both without losing their essential nature." Through our bond, I felt Kieran's sudden understanding. "You think we're evolving into bridge beings?" "I think," Vera said carefully, "that you have the potential to become what the world needs to heal the ancient divide. But the choice must be made consciously, and it will require sacrifice from both of you." "What kind of sacrifice?" Before Vera could answer, shouts erupted from the courtyard below. Through the window, I could see pack members running toward the main gates, their movements urgent and coordinated. Elena appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "We have visitors. A delegation from the Human Research Council." My blood turned to ice. The Human Research Council was a shadowy organization that officially didn't exist. Government scientists and military officials who investigated supernatural phenomena. If they were here, it meant our secret was no longer secret. "How many?" Kieran asked, already moving toward the door. 12 vehicles, military escort. They're flying official flags and carrying documents that give them authority to investigate. Reports of unusual wildlife activity in our territory. Through our bond, I felt Kieran's protective instincts surge, his wolf ready to fight anything that threatened our pack. But I also felt his strategic mind calculating odds, considering options. "This is it," I said quietly. "The choice the prophecy talks about. We can hide, try to maintain the old secrecy. Or we can meet them openly and hope they're ready for the truth. If we reveal ourselves and they react badly," Kieran started. "Then we face the consequences together," I finished. "But if we hide and they discover us anyway, we lose the advantage of controlling the narrative." Vera stood slowly, her ancient eyes bright with something that might have been pride. "The Moonborn chooses unity over secrecy, courage over safety." She moved toward the door, then paused. "The sacrifice the prophecy speaks of. It's the sacrifice of the old ways, the comfortable certainty of separation. You're about to step into a future that's never existed before." Through the window, I could see the human vehicles approaching the main gate, military trucks and black SUVs, carrying people who had no idea that the world was about to change forever. "Are you ready for this?" I asked Kieran through our bond. "I'm ready for anything, as long as we face it together." I took his hand, drawing strength from the steady warmth of his presence in my mind. Below us, two worlds were about to collide, and we were the bridge that would determine whether that collision led to understanding or war. "Elena," I called as we headed for the stairs, "have the pack prepare for formal visitors, and send word to the other Confederation members. If we're doing this, we're doing it right." What should I tell them? I paused at the top of the stairs, feeling the weight of prophecy and possibility settling around my shoulders like a mantle. "Tell them," I said, "that the age of hiding is over. It's time to see if humans and shifters can learn to share the world." Through our bond, I felt Kieran's love and pride and absolute faith in whatever choice we made. It would have to be enough. Because, in the next few minutes, we were going to find out whether the future held unity or war, and the choice we made now would echo through history for generations to come. Chapter 12. Two Worlds Collide. The delegation waited in the formal reception hall, their discomfort obvious despite their attempts at professional composure. 12 humans in dark suits and military uniforms, surrounded by shifters who moved with predatory grace, and watched them with eyes that caught the light strangely. I stood at the top of the grand staircase with Kieran, taking a moment to study the people who would help determine the future of both our worlds. The leader was a woman in her 50s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. Her nameplate read, Dr. Sarah Chen, Director of Anomalous Research. Beside her stood a younger man in military dress, Colonel James Morrison, according to the briefing Elena had hastily prepared. His hand rested casually near his sidearm, but I could smell the tension rolling off him in waves. "They're scared," I observed through our bond. "They should be," Kieran replied. Grimly, they're outnumbered 50-1 by beings who could tear them apart without breaking a sweat. That's not helping. Sorry. You're right. They're here because they're brave enough to seek answers instead of simply attacking what they don't understand. Took a deep breath, drawing on the calm strength of our connection. Through the bond, I could feel not just Kieran's presence but the entire pack. Elena's protective concern, Lydia's nervous excitement, even the former Shadowclaw wolves' determination to prove their loyalty to our new way. We descended the stairs, together, and I watched the humans' reactions as they got their first close look at us. Dr. Chen's scientific curiosity warred with obvious apprehension. Colonel Morrison's military training kept his expression neutral, but I could hear his heart rate spike as we approached. "Dr. Chen," I said, extending my hand in the traditional human greeting. "Welcome to Cross Territory. I'm Sarah Blackwood." She took my hand cautiously, her grip firm despite the slight tremor I could feel. "Ms. Blackwood, thank you for agreeing to see us. I have to admit, When we received reports of organized wolf packs in this region exhibiting unusual behavior, we weren't expecting this. What were you expecting? Rabid animals, maybe. Illegal breeding operations. Certainly not. She gestured at the assembled shifters, their human forms immaculate, but radiating an otherworldly presence that was impossible to miss. This level of organization and intelligence. Dr. Chen, Kieran said, his voice carefully modulated to project calm authority. Before we go any further, I think it's important that we establish some ground rules for this conversation. Such as honesty, I said. Complete, mutual honesty. You're here because you've detected something that challenges your understanding of the natural world. We're willing to provide explanations, but only if you're prepared to hear truths that will fundamentally change how you see reality. Colonel Morrison stepped forward, his posture shifting subtly toward aggressive. Are you threatening us, Ms. Blackwood? Easy, I told Kieran through our bond as I felt his protective instincts flare. He's not being hostile, just cautious. I'm offering you a choice, Colonel, I replied aloud. You can continue operating under the assumption that everything unusual you've encountered has a conventional explanation. Or you can accept that the world contains mysteries that science hasn't yet catalogued. Dr. Chen studied my face with the intensity of someone trying to solve a complex equation. You're not entirely human, are you? The question hung in the air, like a challenge. Around the hall, I could feel the tension spike as every shifter present waited to see how I would respond. No, I said simply. I'm not. The admission sent a ripple through both groups. Several of the human delegation stepped back instinctively, while I felt the pack's collective approval through our supernatural connections. What are you? Dr. Chen asked, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. Instead of answering with words, I let my eyes shift to their wolf gold, holding her gaze as the change rippled through them. Her sharp intake of breath was audible in the sudden silence. We call ourselves shifters, Kieran said, his own eyes flickering with golden light. We've existed alongside humanity for millennia, hidden in plain sight. That's impossible, Colonel Morrison said, but his voice lacked conviction. The genetic requirements alone. Are you familiar with the concept of convergent evolution, Colonel? Dr. Chen interrupted, her scientific mind already racing ahead. Similar environmental pressures creating similar adaptations in unrelated species? You think we evolved separately? I asked. I think, she said carefully, that I need to revise several fundamental assumptions about biology and anthropology. Elena stepped forward from where she'd been watching near the doorway. Perhaps this conversation would be more productive in a more comfortable setting. The library has refreshments prepared. As we moved through the house, I could feel the humans' growing amazement. The architecture alone spoke of a civilization far older and more sophisticated than they'd expected. Ancient tapestries hung beside modern art, while carved symbols that predated written language decorated doorframes and window ledges. How many of you are there? Dr. Chen asked as we settled into the library's comfortable chairs. In North America, approximately 50,000, Kieran replied. Worldwide, perhaps 250,000. The numbers visibly staggered them. Colonel Morrison set down his coffee cup with a sharp clink. 250,000 people with the ability to... What exactly? Change shape? Among other things, I said. Enhanced physical capabilities, extended lifespans, heightened senses. Some of us have additional gifts. Such as? I exchanged glances with Kieran, feeling his support and trust flowing through our bond. Such as the ability to influence other shifters' behavior, to see possible futures, to bridge the consciousness gap between different species. You're telepathic? Not exactly. It's more like empathic connection on a supernatural level. I paused, weighing how much to reveal. The bond between mated pairs allows for actual thought sharing, but that's relatively rare. Dr. Chen leaned forward, her eyes bright with fascination. The reports we received mentioned unusual pack dynamics. Normally, wolf packs are family units, but your community seems to include individuals from multiple bloodlines. Because we're not actually wolves, Elena explained gently. We're beings who can take wolf form, among others. Our social structures are more complex than any natural animal. This is incredible, Dr. Chen breathed. The implications for evolutionary biology, for anthropology, for our understanding of consciousness itself. She turned to her military escort. Colonel, we need to establish formal diplomatic contact immediately. Diplomatic contact? Morrison's expression was skeptical. With what authority? They're not a recognized nation. They're a previously unknown sentient species with a sophisticated society, Dr. Chen shot back. Of course they have authority. The question, I said quietly, is whether humanity is ready to accept that they're not alone on this planet. The words seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Through our supernatural senses, I could feel the weight of history pressing down on this moment. The point where two worlds that had existed in parallel for millennia would either learn to coexist or be driven apart by fear and misunderstanding. What do you want from us? Colonel Morrison asked finally. Nothing, Kieran said, and his honesty was so complete, it was almost tangible. We don't want territory or resources or political power over humans. We want to continue existing without fear of persecution. But hiding is becoming impossible, I added. Technology is advancing too quickly. Satellite surveillance, genetic testing, social media. It's only a matter of time before someone captures definitive proof of our existence. So you're coming forward voluntarily. We're exploring the possibility of controlled revelation. Corrected. Working with human authorities to establish protocols for peaceful coexistence. Dr. Chen set down her cup, her expression thoughtful. You're not the first group to approach us, are you? The question caught me off guard. Through our bond, I felt Kieran's similar surprise. What do you mean? The Human Research Council has been investigating anomalous phenomena for decades, she explained. We've had contact with several unusual communities. Not all of them have been as reasonable as you appear to be. What kind of communities? That's classified. But I can tell you that the existence of supernatural beings isn't entirely unknown to certain government circles. The challenge has always been figuring out how to handle the knowledge responsibly. Colonel Morrison shot her a warning look, but she continued. The question isn't whether we'll have to reveal the truth eventually. The question is how we manage that revelation to minimize panic and conflict. You're talking about gradual exposure, Kieran said. Introducing the concept slowly, through controlled channels. Fiction first, Dr. Chen nodded. Increase public exposure to the idea through entertainment media. Then carefully staged discoveries that ease people into accepting new realities. I felt a flutter of hope, quickly tempered by realism. That could work for some populations, but there will always be groups that react with fear and violence. Which is why we need strong allies within the supernatural community, she replied. Beings who can help maintain peace when tensions rise. Through our bond, I felt Kieran's understanding dawn at the same moment as mine. This wasn't just a first contact situation, it was a job interview. You want us to be liaisons, I said. We want you to be partners, Dr. Chen corrected. Help us develop protocols for peaceful integration. Serve as ambassadors between our communities. Work with us to build a future where both species can thrive. The offer hung in the air between us, heavy with possibility and danger in equal measure. Through the supernatural connections that tied me to the pack, I could feel their varied reactions. Hope, fear, excitement, and caution, all swirling together in a complex emotional tapestry. What do you think? I asked Kieran through our private channel. I think, he replied, that this is what the prophecy was really about. Not choosing between worlds, but helping them choose each other. I looked around the room at the faces watching us. Human and shifter. Alike, all of them waiting to see what path we would choose. The weight of destiny pressed down on my shoulders. But it no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a privilege. Dr. Chen, I said finally, I think we need to have a much longer conversation. About the future, about possibilities, and about what it really means to share a world. Her smile was brilliant with hope and possibility. Ms. Blackwood, I think that's exactly what we all need. Outside the library windows, the sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The day that had started with fear and uncertainty was ending with the first tentative steps toward a future none of us could fully imagine. But through our bond, I felt Kieran's love and strength steadying me, just as I knew my presence steadied him. Whatever came next, we would face it together. And maybe, just maybe, we would succeed in building something beautiful from the collision of two worlds.